In this tutorial, we're going to learn about Lambda functions in Python. A Lambda function is a small, anonymous function that can take any number of arguments, but can only have one expression. Here's the syntax for a Lambda function. Let's break this down. Lambda is the keyword that tells Python we're creating a Lambda function. Arguments are the inputs that our function takes, separated by commas. And expression is the operation that our function performs on those inputs. Lambda functions never have a return statement because it's implied. The result of the expression in the Lambda function is always returned. Here's an example of a Lambda function that takes two arguments and returns their sum. Let's explain this code. We've defined a Lambda function called sum that takes two arguments, x and y. The function then adds those two arguments together and returns the result. We don't need to specify a return statement in a Lambda function because it's implied. This means the result of the expression in the Lambda function will always be returned. We can then call this function like we would any other function, passing in values for x and y. This code calls our sum function and passes in the values 3 and 5 as arguments. The function then adds those two values together and returns the result, which is printed to the console. Now let's compare a Lambda function to a regular function. Here's an example of a regular function that does the same thing as our Lambda function. This function is called add, and it takes two arguments, x and y. It performs the same operation as our sum Lambda function, adding x and y together and returning the result. One key difference between the two is that the Lambda function is anonymous. We don't need to give it a name like we did with add. Another difference is that Lambda functions are often used as arguments to higher order functions, like map or filter. This allows us to write more concise code. Overall, Lambda functions are a powerful and flexible tool in Python that can help us write more efficient code.